Okay, we will start tonight with announcements, and starting with Ms. Howard. Any announcements tonight? Ms. Cromiller? No? Oh no, you guys are so fast. I had a few announcements. No, I'm ready. The first announcement is that Monday is Labor Day. Municipal offices will be closed, and recycling has been moved to Saturday, September 8th. The recycling that normally would have been picked up on Labor Day. And our next council meeting is going to be on a Tuesday evening. It's going to be on Tuesday, September 11th. So that's both an announcement for all the public who are here and also for my colleagues, because September 10th is the Jewish holiday. So, so we'll be meeting on Tuesday that week. Are there any staff announcements? Nope. Okay. Then we'll move on to tonight's award of recognition, and happy to turn the mic over to Council President Cromiller.
Tonight we're recognizing the Princeton Engine Company number 1 Ladies Auxiliary. The Engine Company number 1 Ladies Auxiliary is the only surviving auxiliary connected to the fire department. It has a long history wherein most members are affiliated by family with each other or with firefighters. Many of the members had husbands, fathers, and grandfathers who served as firefighters. The current roster of 16 women includes 4th generation and several 3rd generation Princeton natives who call the Chestnut Street Firehouse home. Combined, they have dedicated nearly 350 years to the community in support of the officers and members of the Princeton Engine Company number 1. The auxiliary originated with charter members in 1959. The husband of the last charter member, Teresa Kruppels, remains a member of Engine Company number 1 today. After several years of inactivity in the 1970s, Robin Davidson McKee, daughter of a charter member and wife of then Princeton Fire Department chief, was instrumental in reorganizing the auxiliary. As some of the other, for the last 37 years, the auxiliary has been an amazing organization of hard-working women who volunteer their time. They provide backup at fire scenes, providing coffee, cold drinks, and food for the firefighters. They march in competitive parades hosted by the county and state. They run successful catering business and organize fundraising events to purchase equipment. Today, they provide funds for charity for needy members of the community and take part in other philanthropic activities. With the recent consolidation of the companies, the ladies have been helping with department events whenever possible. They have made the offer to the department chiefs to aid and help promote the entire consolidated department by helping with the annual pancake breakfast, the fire prevention activities, holiday celebrations, and more. It is with great pride that the mayor and council recognize these important but sometimes unsung heroines in our community. And I would like to thank Kate Warren for providing me with this history. She actually gave me more history, and I'm hoping we could put that on the website and maybe get a photo for our website so it won't all go in vain. There's also a really funny poem written by one of the members a long time ago that really says a lot about the camaraderie that is so obvious that you all share. It's really something to be proud of. So we will give you the certificate, and if the President, Kate Warren, wants to say a few words, or anyone else, you're welcome to.
Come on up, all of you, come on up, please. Kate. I think you're familiar with our microphone
Here we go.
problems here.
Yeah, what I would say is I am so proud of the Ladies Auxiliary. I was not a member for as long as some of the ladies are here this evening. I didn't grow up in Princeton, but as you know, my husband was the chief, and he still is part of the fire police. And the ladies not only did a lot of work, but they also sacrificed a lot of family time when the alarms used to go in. It could be in the middle of a christening, a wedding, it didn't really matter. And we all did that for the better of the community. And these ladies are fantastic ladies. And if you're looking for someone else to recognize, I'd ask you to reach out to the First Aid Ladies Auxiliary too. They've been around for a really long time. They do a lot of good work. And to be recognized in this way, I think would be an honor.
Thank you so much. We appreciate everything that you do to help our first responders do their jobs. There's a proclamation on tonight's agenda for Prostate Cancer Awareness Month, which is in September, and we encourage everybody to get screened. And you can read the text of the proclamation in the agenda packet, which is online. And now we will move on to comments from public on any items that are not already on the agenda. And I know there are some people here for the civil rights report, and I would encourage you, since that's just going to be a report, to make the comments during this public comment period. There will be a work session on the all the parking issues that we're going to be discussing tonight. So if you have a comment about parking, please hold that, and we'll get to you when we talk about parking. So we're going to start with the folks who signed up on the sign-up sheet, and then I'll open it up to everybody else. I would ask that after you finish speaking, if you haven't signed the sheet, that you come to the front table here, and there's another sign-up sheet. So just it makes it easier to make sure we have everyone's name spelled correctly for the minutes and everyone's address. So we'll start with Surinder Sharma.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor, and honorable council people, Indiana, and everybody. My name is Surinder Sharma. I live at 237 Christopher Drive. A couple of items that I like to discuss and bring it to your attention. And first item is affordable housing. I believe we haven't heard much about the progress. I'm sure you're working behind doors, and I think it will be nice for the public to know what are the plans for complying with the affordable housing requirements. It will be really nice if you could put that on the agenda for the next meeting, or if you like to comment on that this time, that'll be much appreciated too. So second item that I like to discuss is how we can reduce the operating budgets and save some money, and by using shared services. As you probably know that there was a report published under Sweeney's directions, how towns and municipalities can reduce their operating budgets, and I had a chance to look at it. There are many other items in that report too, which was published on August 9, 2018, but I like to focus just the one which is most important to us. One of the recommendations in that report is that the municipalities and the school boards should discuss those items which could be shared together, and at the same time, they specifically say that every year they should sit together twice a year. And that's something that, even though it's not a law, it's not a requirement per se from the New Jersey law, but Princeton is always progressive and is always ahead of everybody. I think it'll be nice for the municipality boards and the council people to sit down with the school board people to see where we can have some shared services and reduce cost, not only for the municipality, not only for the school board, for the whole taxpayers. So that recommendation is so white, I mean, very clear, and I have made a copy that I will give it to. So I like you to consider that, and then it goes further. Then it says we should also look at and talk to the adjoining municipalities correspondingly and see if we can come down with some shared services among other municipalities as well. So I think it'll be kind of good something to be proactive and progressive and see if we can come up and reduce some burden to the taxpayers. And talking about the burden to the taxpayers, there's a lot of houses on sale that, I went around the town, and that's kind of unfortunate. I feel kind of sad about it. I even tried to talk to some people, which I couldn't, by the way, and I like to continue. Why? And I like the mayor and the council to see proactively and reach out to the community and see what's going on here. What is bothering you? Is it we are losing our businesses, now we are losing our residents, and I think this is something we should really be proactive again and reach out to the community and see if we can come up with some idea that we can keep those people in town. And the way to do is one of the issues that always comes is the taxes. And I have been kind of saying that we should reduce the taxes, and we have some idea that we like to share with you. And one of the ideas is that we should follow what Sweeney's report is kind of calling for.
Thank you.
And the third item, which is something, if that's okay with you, I'd like to kind of bring it up very quickly. A couple of weeks ago, we were in Seattle, in Kirkland, and we saw something very unique. And the unique is, this is regarding safety of the pedestrians. And what they adopted was based on a couple of deaths of the pedestrians in Kirkland, which is a suburb of Washington, and I saw something really unique. And I was so moved, and I talked to the people using that, and what it was, when you have a crosswalk, instead of just walking, they had a flag on each side of the road on a pole, and when you're walking, you take that flag and walk across. And what we did was we went online, and thanks to Rashma, we made an actual sample of that, exact dimensions with the tapes and everything. I believe that this is a great idea that will help. There are many crosswalks which are not protected or don't have the lights or don't have the signals. And I'm going to present this. Actually, I tried that this week at our Complete Street Committee, but we didn't have the full quorum. But I just want you to know that I will be presenting that, and I'll be working with Jenny and others. So I like you to kind of see this is something we made it, and it's exactly the dimensions, and it works. And they had no fatalities and no serious accident in that particular community. So, and I like you to think about it. So those are the kind of issues. There are a few other issues.
Thank you.
Yeah, but I will I think I'm going to run out of time. So, but there's some other things that I have some suggestions.
Thank you very much.
So I like to give those reports to Mark.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, if I could ask Mr. Shield to update us on the status as those who attended our last meeting when we reviewed goals, that we are going ahead with a study of the shared facility services with the schools, and has there been an update since then?
Yes, I just want to report to council. After that meeting, I've had some discussion with the consultant to provide some quotes to do a feasibility study to look at the Board of Education and the municipality doing shared services, in which areas will be feasible or not feasible. I should be getting a quote back from them within the next week or so, and then we'll begin the process of taking a look at that proposal.
Because the district has expressed its willingness to fund half of whatever the cost of this study is of shared facilities and public works with the municipality.
My recommendation that we follow the form we did with consolidation, so that there's a resolution that is a mirrored resolution that the council would pass and that the school district would pass, saying that we agree to pay 50% before it goes out to bid. I assume something like that's being drafted that will come forward and we can have the discussion here. But that's great to hear. Thank you, Tim, for your leadership on that.
Sure, thank you,
Tyler?
Mayor.
Well, that reminded me of maybe I should have reported this too, that the Complete Streets Committee has formed an ad hoc committee on pedestrian safety, and we're going to be looking at crosswalks, and I do think that seems like a really interesting idea.
And I think that Metuchen is one of 3 towns in Middlesex. Is Metuchen in Middlesex County? Good. Who have adopted a similar pedestrian flag. I can't remember what the other 2 are, but we certainly have contacts in Metuchen who we could find out how it's working out for them.
And I believe there is a report on where we are with the affordable housing and the court schedule. But I would just ask Mr. DeShield to take a look at that, and if there need to be any updates on the timing, we can update that. But essentially, we're waiting for our court date. Okay. That comes to the end of the people who signed up ahead of time to speak. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak as part of public comment? I invite you up to the mic, and please state your name and your address.
Good evening. This is Anita Garoniak, 1 Harris Road. I know you have something as a work session that involves parking. Unfortunately, I cannot stay for that due to some early work requirements. But I just wanted to say, I hope there's no decision to made this evening on that, and there will be some outreach to the neighbors regarding some of the concerns so that we can fully understand the impact on the neighborhood.
Yeah, there are no decisions being made tonight.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak?
Hi, Mayor. I did understand that you would like comments about
We all know you,
civil
but
rights.
can you just state your name for the record? It makes it easier.
Yeah, John Heilner, 4 House Circle, new address. Yay. You're welcome. Yes, thank you. So I did understand that you'd like comments on the civil rights report now. Okay, I'll lead off. So first, I'd like to thank the council subcommittee, Tim, Leticia, Lance Liverman, for the time and effort that they spent reviewing the workings of the CRC after 1 year. This was called for in the ordinance, and I think that was only good considering that the ordinance reestablished the CRC after 20 years of absence, preceded by 30 years of very successful Civil Rights Commission operation. Now, I understand the limitations of New Jersey state law, and that our CRC cannot have investigatory and enforcement powers per state law. This would be unlike a city like Elizabeth, which does have those powers. So really our objective is to be as effective and transparent as possible. Personally, I agree with all the recommendations in the report, except for one. I think they will improve understanding in the community and eliminate any perceived confusion. I would add that perhaps a full-page ad in several publications explaining the process in very simple terms and referencing the website might be one addition. Now, going to what I do not agree with. I respectfully ask that the name Civil Rights Commission not be changed. With all due respect, as I read the report, I noted that none of the interviewees were, quote, the public, end quote. So really, this is speculation that the public does not understand. I think a name change downgrades the Commission's importance in the eyes of the public and makes Princeton appear less interested in protecting and enhancing civil rights. The name change will really do nothing to enhance public understanding, in my opinion. It's really the other recommendations of the report that will significantly improve public understanding. Now, I did a quick Google search last night after Mr. Quinn was nice enough to send me the report, and I found that at least 4 New Jersey towns with active civil rights commissions, not commissions on civil rights, exist. So these other 4 towns have no problem with that name. They are Lakewood with a population of 100,000, Rutherford with 18,000, Paulsboro with only 6,100, and of course Montclair at 39,000. Throughout the U.S., there are many other such towns. We, as a subcommittee of human services, we researched that a couple of years ago. So why is the retention of Civil Rights Commission as a name important? I think, one, it signifies that our progressive town is really serious about protecting and being proactive in protecting civil rights. That we are not going backwards in times of heightened concern and fear by many residents with what's happening on the national stage. And finally, I think it signifies that Princeton will not take a back seat to anyone in this regard. So thank you for your consideration of that suggestion.
Thanks, John. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak?
Yaina Moore, 19 Green Street. I would like to say that I think the change in name from Civil Rights Commission to Commission on Civil Rights is confusing in itself for the public. Usually, and probably on a national, federal level, commissions are in research, data collection, and report generating sort of functions that are just leading to a single endpoint of study and not necessarily entertaining ongoing issues. So you really are confusing the whole issue and not staying true to what the Civil Rights Commission, which is in a long, ongoing, and established process to hear issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak?
Hi, Roberto Schiraldi, 107 Delamere Road, Not in Our Town, Youth Concerns Committee, and some others. Thank you all for your service, especially around such an important issue as the Civil Rights Commission, which we all agree we need so much here in this town. So the one thing that came up besides supporting the name, which I think is really important to give it the legitimacy it deserves, is I noticed about the conflict resolution piece. And I don't really know what the training is entailed in that, but I do know how important that is. I guess my plea is that the training really be extensive and looked at very carefully, because it's such a tricky and sensitive issue. And we need to make sure also that, because what I've heard my plea would be that we make sure that whenever there's conflicts, that they're really carried through on, so that everyone feels both sides really feel like they've been heard, so there's real resolution. And the last thing is, thank you for this opportunity to say that I'm real grateful to honor the land and the ancestors of the Lenni Lenape people, whose land we are on without permission, and I hope that we never forget that, and also to honor the ancestors and the descendants of the enslaved Africans who helped build this community and who still contribute so much to it. I hope we always say those kinds of things here at these meetings. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Leighton Newland, 230 Birch Avenue. Princeton has a long history that is rather ugly, and we all have spent a lot of time talking about that during the historic designation issue and other issues. I think that no matter what name you call the Civil Rights Commission or the Commission on Civil Rights, I would not like to see the name change, because I think it sends a unclear message. But in addition, I think the most important thing is that the body that makes up this commission not have their hands tied. We know that there is implicit bias in the United States of America, and we are facing very difficult times now from the top down. and Princeton certainly has its share of implicit bias. And were this committee unable to impact policy both at the town level and at the institution level would be a shame. And I would like to see this town continue on its current path of being progressive, and the root word of progressive is progress. And we should always be mindful that if we don't continue to take steps forward, that it's not good to take one step forward and two steps back, because then you're traveling negatively, and that's really not what we want as a community. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak?
Good evening. Ronald Ponder. How are you guys doing? Good. First, I'd like to start with a couple of questions. What is the procedure for dealing with the report? What will happen once the report is given? Is there a vote to be taken?
Not tonight. So tonight is a report. The Civil Rights Commission hasn't had a chance to discuss it fully yet. So the next step will be taking it to the CRC. And then most likely it'll go back to that subcommittee. And then if there are pieces that council needs to act on, those pieces will be brought to council to act on, whether that's new policies that need to be voted on and approved, if there's any changes to the ordinance or any changes to the resolution that was used when it was passed.
So
that's a subsequent step.
So if I understand you, there will be a possibility of further discussions about the recommendations before the council.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. Multiple. Yeah. Well, so it'll go to the Civil Rights Commission, and then it'll go back to the subcommittee, and then it'll come back to council.
Okay.
And Mayor, sorry, and just to that, and Mayor, the Civil Rights Commission meetings, or Tim, you are open to the public as well, right? So multiple places where the public can.
Oh, that's great, because there was some concern in the community, including my concern, that I just saw this report this morning. And so it makes it very difficult to study it and to comment on it. My second question is, I don't understand what is in the law that creates the limitations that the report seeks regarding conflict resolution. So I understand that there's no, I think the statute is NJSA 510 and 5-14.2, and I see no case law supporting the recommendations of limitation for investigatory, and I know you say special investigatory, but for investigatory and for conflict resolution. I didn't quite see that. Do you understand my question?
Are you asking what's in the state law in terms of?
Where in the state law provides the limitations that are requested in this report, that are recommended in this report regarding the investigatory and conflict resolution status of the.
Right. I would say instead of getting with the back and forth right now.
It's just a question.
I know.
No back and forth.
I think that's, unless, Trish, you want to answer that briefly now, or we can talk about it when we get to the report.
Yeah, unfortunately, I was checking to see if I had my research with me, and I don't, so I can't give a precise. Yeah, yes. Is that better? A little closer. Okay. Unfortunately, I don't have my research with me tonight, so I can't give a precise answer, but I'd be very happy to follow up if the council would like me to. I can put something quick in writing that might help the public in terms of the answer to that question, because it's a legitimate question. But I can't give you a precise answer sitting here this minute.
Okay. So I will save most of my comments, since we will have an opportunity, and I'll have an opportunity personally to look at this. But I would like to say that I am very happy that we are at this point where we're looking at the Civil Rights Commission. The main reason for me filing the complaint, which I did file against the school board with the Civil Rights Commission, is that at the time I filed it, the Civil Rights Commission was totally dysfunctional in terms of resolving complaints. And my hope, not only was it dysfunctional, it is still reflected in the website where I see very few minutes. It was reflected in one of the activities that's lauded in this report was the appearance of students before the Civil Rights Commission. But as far as the students were concerned, their voices were lost in the wind. There was no recording, there was no sharing outside of that room, and there was really no follow-up. So it was important for me and for this community that the Civil Rights Commission become functional and do its job, which it still has yet to do. My one comment about the recommendations is I'm really concerned about the ability of the commission to suspend investigations for compromise of conflict resolution. And that compromise is considered to be a compromise when something is public. So what was reflected when I filed my complaint was I was told that because it was in the press, the commission would not take the complaint. The problem there is that the commission negotiated the complaint with me as opposed to making sure that the parties had an opportunity to negotiate. The commission should not have that power. Think about it. Thank you. I'll be back.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate your comments. I do want to say that we are all trying here, and I would say that people who are trying the most are some of the people who are trying the most, the people on the commission, and so I do want to recognize their work and their efforts. When we started this, there was a lot of negotiation in setting up the structure, and I think it's important sometimes that we try things and know that we might not get it 100% right the first time, as long as we're all operating with good faith. So I think this is an important process where I think we're trying to take an honest look at what's working, what's not working, what we can change to make it better. Because I think one of the good things is hopefully everybody has a shared values in terms of what we're trying to accomplish here. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak?
Tommy Parker. Wow. 12 Lee Avenue. And just a couple brief points. The Civil Rights Commission has been around actually for 50 years. It's created in 1968 by a group of concerned citizens in conjunction with concerns from the local government at the time, which was the borough and the township. And it's what, excuse me, it became this joint commission. It also put Princeton as a leader in any such community efforts. It's one of the greatest community efforts that any town of this size, and absolutely in Princeton, for all of us who have lived and grown up here, know they took a real concern, consideration, and interest in following the guidelines that had been set forth by the political movements at the time, the president, from the president down to the grassroots community leaders, the importance of the Civil Rights Commission. Princeton jumped out front. And I just want to say we need to focus on that, remember that, and continue that. We'll work out all the technicalities. They can be, explained any number of ways. I know that once the procedure gets taken care of, at a personal level, I don't think the idea of a name change is the greatest thing we can do. It does not necessarily eliminate any misunderstanding about what we do functionally. Once we get up and running, all right, and get the press out in terms of who we're here. We're here available for you. We want to hear from you. And all these, the awareness of what we can do and how that works, it will be built right into the procedures as has been recommended, as I read it in the report. All those things will make it clearly understood what Civil Rights Commission function is here in this community as it relates to whatever statutes keep being quoted relative to a community of this size. All right, but in conversations which also I didn't see in the report did happen, we had the Attorney General's office down and the director of the State Civil Rights Commission come down and begin our process of sanctioning and awareness in our first season. We have a retreat that we are right now committed to and already planning so that any of the questions and concerns that came from the citizens and in these statements about the dysfunction and how you go about developing a conflict resolution as it relates to these laws. So we're moving and we're on top of it. And, you know, like I said, this was one of the greatest initiatives of any community of this size and definitely here in Princeton. So let's continue to take the lead.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak?
Kip Cherry, 24 Dempsey Avenue. My message is kind of short and sweet, and that is, I don't think that changing the name of the commission solves anything, and I think it just creates confusion. Is our Civil Rights Commission different from other communities with a Civil Rights Commission? Maybe if it's a commission on civil rights, it's a study commission and not the normal Civil Rights Commission. Let's just keep it simple, and let's get the word out as to what it's supposed to do. That's the important stuff. So I think that we're kind of monkeying around on the periphery, and we need to get to the heart of it, which is to make sure that the public understands what the capabilities are of the commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak? Mr. DeShield, did you want to make a comment?
No, I just want to let council know I've been working with Trishka, and we found the memo that she's talking about. I'm going to suggest maybe we repost it. It is the memo that was put together to answer some of those questions when we initially did this, and maybe repost it on the website so that people could read it.
That'd be terrific. And maybe when we, after the, as part of the report, it would be helpful just to have a quick summary while people are here, too, if that's possible. If it's pretty long, then we can post it.
Yeah, it's absolutely possible. The reason I'm also suggesting that we repost the memo is that, as you know, there's rarely a quick and easy answer to any legal question, and I would rather just do the question justice with the complete answer. I'll still do my best to summarize it when you get to the report, but I think the memo will answer it better.
Okay, that's fine. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak on either the Civil Rights Commission report or any items that are not already on the agenda? Okay, then we're going to move on to reports, and now we have the Civil Rights report. So I'd like to turn it over to Councilman Quinn and Councilwoman Fraga, who've been working on this in conjunction with Councilman Liverman, who unfortunately was not able to be here tonight. So just by introduction, I want to thank the subcommittee. I know that we had given a very short time frame to turn around the report, and once you all started interviewing people, you realized you needed to talk to more and more people, and I think a lot of the time that was spent talking to people, which was important work to do. So I want to thank you for that, and take it away.
Sure. I want to thank Lance and Letitia for the hard work that went into this report. Our process was thorough, and our report went through multiple revisions before it was ready to be released. We think all this hard work was worth it. It took longer than we thought, and we thank council for its patience. Before I highlight the recommendations briefly, since they're all in the report, I'd like to read a statement from Councilman Liverman, who regrets that he could not be here tonight. Quote, I want to take this opportunity to apologize for not being able to make tonight's council meeting. I want to first thank Councilman Quinn and Councilwoman Fraga for their dedication and commitment to making sure that every resident of Princeton is treated fairly and with respect. I was part of the subcommittee that was tasked with the job of reviewing our current civil rights ordinance. The ordinance was adopted in 2016 and was initiated to continue the great work Princeton is known for in the area of civil rights. I am confident that with the extensive interviewing process and the input from mayor, administration, and the civil rights chairs, our recommendations and adjustments would only strengthen the current civil rights ordinance. I stand behind this thoughtful, heartfelt, and caring civil rights report. Thanks to everyone who participated, and always remember this is a living document, that it is always subject to change if needed. End quote. I agree with Councilman Liverman that these are recommendations, not mandates, and I'll outline the recommendations briefly, and we'll get feedback from council and any additional public comment. The first recommendation regarded the name of the commission, and this was out of the discussion, and I think it, not to throw her under the bus, but it specifically came from Council President Crummiller, who wondered if a change in the name wouldn't help to clarify the role and mission. And we talked at length about the name, and we went through several alternatives using the word advisory and including the word conflict resolution. But in the end, we decided to mirror the language of the state statute, which says the mayors or chief executive officers of the municipalities in the state may appoint local commissions on civil rights. So it's a minor change, and I don't think that any of us is wedded to that recommendation, and we agree that there are more important things in the report than that. I personally am fine with staying with the name Civil Rights Commission.
Should we, I think it might make the most sense for us to talk about each of these
Sure.
recommendations as we go through them. So, yeah, Ms. Krummeller?
I mean, since I made kind of an off-the-cuff remark, I mean, I didn't I didn't mean it to be such a serious recommendation, and I definitely have heard everyone, and I don't think we should change the name, especially to the name that's just so similar. So, to be clear on that.
Okay. So we're not making any formal decisions tonight, but it sounds like we probably won't be making that decision to change the name unless there's a desire from.
No. I
somebody
mean,
official.
I agree, and I just think it actually just brings home the point that how important it is to clarify what the scope and authority of the body is in how we talk about it publicly and all the messaging, so people maintain their rights and we're respecting, So that, to me, that's far more important than. Especially, like, I think you wouldn't want to create brand confusion and change the name, but it brings home the importance of sort of working out those other issues, especially on how we explain the authority and reach of the work of the body.
Excellent.
So I just wanted to add to the comments that my colleague on the committee made, and also to thank both Lance, Councilman Liverman, and Councilman Quinn, especially thanks to Tim for organizing, scheduling interviews, and for drafting the report. I know there has been much discussion that there is perhaps at times confusion as to the role of the commission, and much emphasis has been put on what the commission cannot do, such as no investigative power and no enforcement power. And to be clear, the CRC, even when it was first established 50 years ago, never had such authority in reading the original ordinance. So rather than debating what the CRC cannot do, I would rather focus on what it can do. It can do outreach and education, do know your rights workshops, and provide a forum to resolve concerns through conflict resolution, and that's just to name a few. When the current CRC was established almost 2 years ago, it was understood that the ordinance would be reviewed in a year's time to determine if any changes needed to be made. At that time, I took it to mean that any changes would be to improve and not weaken the CRC. And I went into the process with that in mind. I know my colleagues on the committee did that as well. But with that said, from the beginning, and especially after hearing all your comments, I must add that I am not in favor of changing the name of the commission either.
Okay, great. Thank you. Mr. Quinn, you want to continue?
Sure. So our second recommendation involved the orientation process for new members. And in thinking about how we could improve the orientation process, we followed the lead of the planning board. Each year after the planning board reorganizes, the board meets in a legal session at which the attorney discusses the statutory underpinnings of the board with members and answers any general questions for all members. So while specifically addressing new members, the questions come from all members of the planning board, and even longtime members find this session helpful. Our report refers to these proposed meetings as happening in, quote, closed session, unquote. I'm not sure that that's accurate, whether the legal sessions of the planning board are open to the public, and we'd look to guidance from our attorney on this point before making any formal recommendation about how the orientation should proceed. The next section dealt with voluntary non-binding conflict resolution. The subcommittee reached the conclusion that rather than forming a separate subcommittee of the Civil Rights Commission, which is called for under the ordinance right now, that all commissioners who wish to participate in conflict resolution can be properly trained to do so. The primary reason for this change, which would be a change to the ordinance, is logistical. The challenges of getting 4 volunteers and 2 parties together for a non-mandated dialogue and possible multiple non-mandated dialogues are significant. And we think that having a larger pool of commissioners who are properly trained in conflict resolution from which to choose will allow these sessions to go forward in a timely manner. Any feedback on that?
I just have one logistical concern about that, which is when people are appointed to the commission, it is a bigger commitment to sign up to be on the commission plus on this subcommittee. And I understand why this is easier for planning individual sessions. I just want to make sure that we end up with a commission where people understand what they've signed up to do. And I don't know if there's a way to have some positions be sort of designated as I am agreeing to be on the commission and I am agreeing to go through this training and serve on the subcommittee. And maybe it wouldn't be limited to those people, but at least I would have the assurance that there'd be at least 4 people who've made that commitment versus 9 people who are interested in serving on the commission but may or may not be able to make that extra commitment based on their schedule. I just want to be sort of upfront what
Sure.
volunteers are signing up for so that
Sure, and I think that's why we said that commissioners may or may not opt to be trained, and to leave it up to individual commissioners. There are commissioners who might be interested in education and outreach exclusively and wouldn't necessarily be comfortable participating in a conflict resolution session. Then again, there might be multiple members of the commission who do want to, and sort of selecting a small cohort and limiting the training to that small cohort really does sort of, it limits the flexibility to have sessions when people take these fabulous vacations that I follow on Facebook, and I also like to set up a system whereby matters could be dealt with and not be dependent upon vacation schedules.
I mean, I'm happy to try this, and just if there's a problem, again, I think we should just keep track of whether we're having trouble fielding the group or not with this process. Yeah, Ms. Krumiller?
I have a question about using volunteers for a conflict resolution process. Is that something that other places do? I mean, it seems like it's a specialized area that there are professionals that do it. And is it appropriate for community volunteers to do it? That's one question I have.
Well, that's different.
The other question is, in conflict resolution sessions, is it usual to have 4 people? They might be both usual and done everywhere.
I think it could be 2 or 3. In the ordinance, it mentioned 3, but it could be 2 or 3.
No fewer than 3 and no more than 4.
Yeah.
So,
but as far as
in the ordinance.
sitting at the table with conflict resolution, I think, am I correct, Tommy? 2, I believe, was to start. But and your other question was, the confusion with conflict resolution.
Just using, we get applicants, and it feels like such a serious issue that do we have an option of somehow using professionals? Because
well, that would be the next step. If conflict resolution is not an option, then they're referred to mediation, which is a more formal process.
I see.
And I believe actually, like when people come in, they're given all of the options. So somebody could opt to ask for this list of volunteer mediators in the community.
Correct.
And say, I want to use that route. And the commission would sort of facilitate maintaining that list and making it available to people.
So really what conflict resolution, what makes it different from mediation, and we say that it's voluntary and non-binding, pardon me, is that it's a discussion between neighbors, more or less, that is less formal than a mediation session. And Letitia was correct that mediation is the next step, and then the step after that, if something can't be mediated, is to go to the State Division on Civil Rights. But oftentimes, we think that bringing the right people in the room who have the proper training can, we can forego those other processes and have neighbors work with neighbors to...
And basically in a facilitated discussion.
Okay, one more question about it. I know, so with the State Division of Civil Rights, it seems like you're kind of saying, you're on your own. It makes it pretty clear that the commission can't do anything else, but it seems like that might be where people need the most help, because just reading between the lines, it seems like people don't have a lot of confidence in that venue for getting justice. I don't know, is that the truth, or does anybody know about that up here? Nobody, because that seems like, with the real civil rights violations, that seems like, on paper, the place where people should go. So do we have a way of helping those people go, do we have volunteers that we can hook them up with to help them shepherd through that?
Well, first, I would say that it's not the commission's role to determine whether someone has a valid complaint but they are given all the options, and not just to the State Civil Rights Commission, but also give them referrals to let them know that they have the option to seek legal counsel.
The recommendation is turn your mic on. The other recommendation was to expand the materials that are part of the intake process. So right now, people who file to bring a matter to the Civil Rights Commission receive a sheet that says in no uncertain terms multiple times that anything that you write on your form is discoverable, it can be Oprah'd, it's a public record. And the guidelines never talk about how this dialogue is best handled, which we think, and which not we as council members, but people who have done this work believe that it best happens when there's at least an understanding that confidentiality will be maintained. And so the thought is that you see in the report there are specific recommendations for language to add to sort of balance the legal aspects with setting some expectations about what's going to happen going in, how these dialogues are most successful, and that was our final recommendation.
Ms. Howard? I mean, I had a general, I'll start with that makes sense to me. So I would say yes, and I think that we're seeing nodding heads. I mean, just to step back and give a broader, because I sometimes worry we lose the forest for the trees. This has been, I want to commend Councilman Quinn for an incredible process, and I know you've worked really hard, and you had great help from Leticia and Lance, and this is an example to me of what is so special about Princeton is that we have so many people who would care and would come out for this kind of discussion and are that engaged. I don't want us to lose sight. We're so in the weeds on one prong of the work of the commission that I want to echo what Councilwoman Fraga said, which is that not to forget and lose sight about the other, the other potential work of the commission and how important that is. So I agree with Tommy that the details, I think, well-meaning people, we can work out the details, but I don't want us to lose sight. Just within the last 2 weeks, we've had horrible, racist, hateful stuff posted on Nassau Street, right? So, I mean, sort of like, I don't want to lose sight of that, of the work, both the outreach and education work that is ongoing, even as we work out the details on some of this. I think it's not like, I hope doesn't feel like we're suspending, and I know, given Tommy's passion, that the work continues. So just sort of, I don't want us to lose sight of all of that, and for people in the community to think that everything is on hold, and that we would love. I think Leighton. I want to echo Leighton's comments about systemic issues that we should be addressing. So again, there's the piece of the work that is about individual cases, but I think we all recognize that these issues are so broad and that there are systemic issues that we should be addressing. And would love, I want to reiterate, I've only got a couple more months up here, but would reiterate sort of our that we would love to have broader policy recommendations if there are things that we need to be doing on a broader issue. I know that's come up, Mayor, you've raised in the context of the Human Rights Commission, which does an annual survey of municipalities on how friendly municipalities are to LGBTQ community. And we have done well on that, but we could do better. And so maybe, to sort of just an encouragement that we would love to have that kind of engagement too. And so I know we're a lot of energy is being invested on this front, but would love to make sure we're continuing that work on the more systemic, because we're not, to make progress. I hope it's only be by, nose to the grindstone on some of those systemic issues. So, so I think that outreach and education work and keep coming back. So Sorry to give you more work, Tommy, but I know this is the stuff that you care so much about. So I would encourage us to, and maybe, and Tim, you were so good to react immediately to when this stuff happened on Nassau Street and to bring it back to us and say how important it was for us to be taking a stance and to be sending that message. And I know that was because you, as liaison of the Civil Rights Commission, were hearing that all the time, but would love other thoughts on how we can be doing more, especially in light of the current climate.
I'd like to just address a couple things that my friend Ronald Ponder brought up in his, and maybe just by way of answering. It's my hope, and I can't guarantee it because I'm not looking at the website, that all of our minutes have been updated, and if you don't see minutes for a date, then it's likely that meeting was canceled. We had a couple of weather cancellations, we had a couple of quorum cancellations, and I would urge Ronald to read the memo that we're going to release about the state law, but I can tell him that it's NJSA 10, and I don't know the language, so I'm not a lawyer, obviously. NJSA 10:5-14.2. That spells out the procedure for municipalities who are greater than 200,000 in a county and how they need to have commissions approved by the Attorney General and what's involved in that. So that's 10:5-14.2.
Great, thank you. Are there any other comments from council? All right. I want to thank again both the, I want to thank Councilwoman Howard for her comments, and to thank all the members of the subcommittee, and to continue to thank you because you might have some additional work here. And I want to thank everybody who came out tonight. I mean, this conversation has been a little dry and procedural, and I think we all understand we live in Princeton. Process is really important, but at the end of the day, this is about people and about how we treat each other and the kind of community we want to live in, and the work of the CRC is so important to ensuring that we're working every day towards creating the kind of community that we all feel respected in, and feel happy to live in. So I want to thank you all for doing that, and it is a living, breathing process that will continue to evolve and get better. So thank you. I just want to repeat the answer to the question that Reinhold raised. The next step in this process will be the Civil Rights Commission meeting, and please shout at me if I'm saying the wrong date. I believe they meet September 18th. September 18th, and are you meeting in the community room still? At 6:30 p.m. What day of the week is that? I don't know. Tuesday, September 18th, 6:30 p.m. in the community room. And then after that discussion, I would ask the subcommittee to take another look at the recommendations and bring back to council anything that's actionable here. It looked like some of those recommendations were things that just the commission could do on its own. Other things might require council action. So I'll work with you to make sure we can get whatever needs to get on the agenda. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks for your support throughout the entire process.
Thank you. Yeah, well, it's not over yet.
I'm sorry I threw Jenny under the bus there on the name.
No,
this is an important.
You didn't. I want to.
The record reflects that, though.
No, I want to say thank you too.
Yeah.
Everyone's saying thank you.
Yeah, thank
I really
you.
want to say thank you too.
Okay, and now we're going to move on to other reports, and I'll start on my right again with Ms. Howard. Any other?
Yes, thank you. I have two exciting. The first is really an exciting new step in our efforts to address food insecurity in Princeton and to promote healthy living, in which it's really exciting to announce that our local farmers market on Thursday will begin accepting SNAP payments next Thursday. So SNAP, many of you know, is the federal program for low-income families. It's called the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Its previous name was food stamps, but it was changed, updated to SNAP. And it's a wonderful program, but people, beneficiaries of the program, couldn't use the program at the farmers market. And I really want to commend Jeff Grosser and his partner, Melissa Lyles, and actually previously it really goes back to a work Elisa did, right? NARA did. So this is a wonderful collaboration between the Human Services Department and the Board of Health, working with the farmers market. And the issue, I don't think was lack of desire, but there are operational issues about how you use the SNAP, right? How you use your benefits. And what's really exciting is that the farmers market is going to match the first $10 that beneficiaries spend. One concern, of course, is that the farmers market can be pricey, and so we wanted to help people. And so there's some work to be done to advertise this, to make sure people know that they can use their SNAP benefits there. So I know that Health and Human Services will be doing outreach, but we need to make a big deal about this. So it's starting next week, Mayor. Maybe we can think about, we don't have a meeting before then, but maybe we can reflect on it after the first one, or I think, we're going to want to be talking about this. And it also comes on the heels, I think we mentioned, but we haven't also really highlighted enough, that we're going to be having now a second monthly WIC clinic. And many of you will remember that 5 years ago, we were at risk of losing our WIC clinic. And now, not only have we stabilized it to the extent that we have a vibrant WIC clinic that's reaching a lot of people, we now have the vendor had an interest to do a second WIC clinic a month, which means we're going to be able to receive more people and do it at a different time of day, which will help reach people who maybe couldn't attend the other time. So really exciting news on the front, on the food insecurity front and reaching vulnerable populations. Jeff, you've worked so hard on these. Anything I missed you want to add?
No, thank you, Councilwoman Howard. I just wanted to mention that the WIC clinic occurs the third Friday of each month in the community room. If you know anybody that might be eligible, it's for expecting mothers and children up to the age of 5 years old. They also have a supplemental nutrition program where they'll provide WIC checks. Those are the next kind of feat that we're going to try to push the farmers market to also accept. And if that happens, people will have really tremendous access to nutritious foods. So thank you for advertising this and for pushing this. In the next couple of weeks, look for it on our website as well.
Thank you. And then the second is that I'm going to address one of the resolutions we have up later on the agenda, because we tend to go through our resolutions really quickly. So I just want to highlight that we have a resolution that takes the next step on our work on health and all policies. And I want to thank my colleagues for supporting. I've been raising this as a priority for council, and Jeff Grosser again has done great work on pushing this issue. We've had a subcommittee of the Board of Health working on this issue, which is how do we incorporate thinking about the health impacts of all the work we do, because we know that health and all of our work are so intertwined. And so this resolution that we'll be taking up later tonight formally adopts the health and all policies approach, but we've been doing this work, and it catalogs all the work we've been doing, and in particular in creating checklists for different departments in the municipality so they can incorporate thinking about health into their work. And it also summarizes and highlights 3 different initiatives in which we're already working across the municipality. The first is the Bloomberg Mayor's Challenge on food waste. The second is Vision Zero, which is pedestrian safety, which we know is not just about health, but health is a key component there. And finally, a worksite wellness program where our Department of Health is working with the police department on blood pressure monitoring. So we've been working on this for about 18 months, Jeff, and I think it's really nice to be taking this next step. What did I miss?
Nothing. Actually, you pretty much hit everything I was going to mention. The only other thing I would have added was that this is a new policy approach that about 100 years ago was being taken really by municipal engineers trying to make sure that water was safe. And obviously different forms of refuse were going where they should. But it's also taken up a new groundswell where a lot of different departments are working with health in order to maximize, social equity and other determinants of health that are important that sometimes get lost when only one department's working on a particular issue. So again, Councilwoman Howard, you've been fantastic on this. You've helped establish the subcommittee for the Board of Health, and it's just been a lot of fun working on these things with you. And
Thank you.
Board
And
of
I
Health
think-
thanks you. So
I think we'll be the first municipality in Mercer to adopt such an approach. I think some North Jersey municipalities have, but I'm sure they haven't done it as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Cruller, any reports? Ms. Quinn, any reports? Ms. Park, any reports? All right, I have a few reports. The first is that Princeton has signed on to an amicus brief that was drafted by New York City, and this is to support the lawsuit that's attempting to block the FCC's repeal order of net neutrality protections. And we're happy to support other cities. There was just a story that showed out in California with the wildfires that first responders were having their communications limited through, I can't remember which the company was, so I don't want to say the wrong name. Was it Verizon? Yeah. And it's it's obviously something that impacts consumers, but it's also something that impacts municipalities too, and our ability to do our work and keep the public safe. There was a great editorial in today's newspaper, for those of you who didn't catch it, in the Star Ledger and the Trenton Times, praising Princeton's efforts with consolidation and holding us up as a model for the rest of the state, and it's always nice to see that. I know we've all heard about the emerald ash borer. There's another invasive pest now called the spotted lanternfly, and it's another dangerous invasive pest that's been spotted in Mercer County, and it's especially damaging to agricultural crops. And we're going to be putting information up on the municipal website, but it's probably something you're going to be hearing more and more about in the coming weeks and months and years. And then finally, many of us are going to be at a ribbon cutting tomorrow morning with our partner Community Options, and they're opening a new group home in Princeton for developmentally disabled adults. So we're really happy to be partnering with them on another group home, and we already have a few in Princeton that have been really successful and providing important housing for members of our community that need it. Are there any staff reports?
Just one report. Walnut Lane paving and striping was completed last week. Thank you. And so we'll be looking to install trees in September, and also have the signage up before school starts. That's it.
That's terrific. With even a couple days to spare. Great job. Okay. We'll move on then to our work session for this evening, which is all about parking. And as everybody who's been part of these conversations in the past knows, that parking in Princeton, we could spend all night talking about it and we'd only scratch the surface. So we're going to be talking about a sliver of the issues tonight. We'll probably be talking about other issues at almost every single council meeting between now and the end of the year. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Stockton.
Thank you for that introduction. Okay, so some people may notice that we've put out notices on the smart card machines and the pay stations around town. Thank you, Councilman Quinn, for assisting with this graphic design. Just indicating what the smart card phase-out schedule will be. As soon as the new meters are installed, smart cards are no longer an option for payment at those meters. We will be accepting payment at the Spring Street parking garage until the end of the year, and that time frame is flexible as well. It's not a hard and fast date, so if there is a desire among council to extend that, that's definitely possible based on our hardware.
Yeah, I'd say I don't know about my colleagues. I've received quite a few emails, questions, and concerns from people who have money stored up on their smart cards, and I've gotten several requests wanting, with the desire for people to come with their smart card and get a cash reimbursement for the amount that's on there. And part of the reason why we can't do that is everybody who's bought a smart card knows one of the nice things about it is that you pay, I can't remember exactly what it is now, but like you pay $20 and you get $25 worth of parking. So we can't be handing back out cash that the town has never collected. It's just that we can't absorb that liability, and it's too complicated to piece it together. So we are asking people to use it. The meters are going to be out there for at least another month, probably
2 months.
2 months, and then it'll still be usable in the parking garage. And I would recommend that, I don't think we have to decide it tonight, but that maybe council be open to extending the amount of time that it's usable in the parking garage beyond December 31st. Ms. Krumiller?
Yeah, I agree with that, and I'd like to make the recommendation that we extend it if it's not a detriment to our system. If it's, because as I understand it, the garage is going to continue to use the same system, and so it would not be difficult to extend it. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So I wanted to get the word out, and I want to, make people understand that they can't get their money back, because that's one of the big issues. People don't understand that we already got the money. When people buy their smart cards, the money goes into our budget, we use it, and the reality is if we'd have to take it out of this budget to pay people back, that's just a cold, hard reality. So it's not like we'd be getting any windfall if we didn't give people money back. But on the other hand, I do feel more sympathy. I got some feedback also about it, and so why not let people use it until maybe, but why don't we just pick a date so we can make the signs, like, why don't, I think we were talking about June. Do you have any reason to not pick a date?
Not at this point. I know we are looking at not replacements, but upgrades and some adjustments to the equipment that we have at the Spring Street Garage, and the smart card equipment within that system has always been challenging. So, it's something that we want to phase out, but we don't have immediate plans to do that. That's really like our phase 2 or phase 3
Well,
of
what
of
about,
the
say, like
project.
April? Because probably we wouldn't do anything before that, and that's how many months from now? I can't count, but 4, 5, 6.
When do you expect any change to garage technology? Would it be in the first 3 quarters of 2019, potentially?
That's what I would expect.
Okay.
Hopefully the first half of 2019.
Oh, so then phasing it out in June might be problematic.
Right, but April could be an option.
Okay.
Definitely.
Because that way we can make the signs and we can just have the date, and we can, I think
Tie it to
April
tax
seems
day or
reasonable to
something.
me, April 30th.
I can make the signs at 1 in the morning.
Well, just so that we have
Amazed,
a date. It just,
yeah.
it doesn't seem like it's a decision that's going to change unless we decided to get new technology, but that decision's not going to come for a while, for the garage,
I would say sometime in April, whatever makes sense for an end date.
We will do that.
Not
Yeah,
April
that'd be
Fool's
great.
Day, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so just to recap from the last meeting, all of the decisions that were made by council. So we went through the hours of operation and came up with this schedule for the hours of operations, Monday to Thursday, 9 to 8, Friday and Saturday 9 to 9, and then Sunday 1 to 8. So those would be the times, the metering times. We reviewed the parking meter zones, and we came up with the map with the 3 zones. We reviewed 30-minute meter locations that included additional 30-minute meters. We discussed whether or not we wanted to install parking meters in the loading zones, and that was a definite no. And then also we discussed a previous council work session about the expansion of metering on Witherspoon Street and Henry Avenue. And the idea is to now move ahead with that as part of this implementation. So,
Can I just go, sorry,
Yep.
there was just one thing I just didn't want to get lost for the loading zones. I also think there was an interest in labeling them also for rideshare drop-off and pickup spots.
yes, it'll actually be
that's for
passenger
tonight.
loading, and we'll cover that in a few more slides. So, so this is the updated parking map. You had seen this at the last meeting, and it's on the website with the presentation from the last meeting, but I have added to this. There was a question about how would the off-street lots be handled. And so I've updated that to include, so in Zone 1, which are the 30-minute, 2-hour meter limits, that would include Tulane Yard and Park Place East Yard. So that would include those, and it's actually, it's not a change from their current time limits. So, not east. West has the 12, west has the longer, and so you'll see that's in the Zone 3. So yeah, Zone 3 will include the Park Place West Yard and the Princeton Rail Lot. And in Zone 3, I had indicated 11 hours because if you look at the 9 a.m. to 8 p.m., that's essentially 11 hours, but then on Friday and Saturday, that's 12 hours, and Sunday has its own hours. So it's essentially, it's all-day parking, and it just follows with what the hours of operation are for metering. So that's just a clarification I made to make that make more sense. So this is now our most current map. It does also, as you see, include the meter extension on Henry and on Witherspoon. So that's now on this map. One of the things that goes along with having zones with time limits is some sort of an ordinance or regulation about no meter feeding or no reparking. So no reparking is something that's recommended by our consultant. It's kind of like a step up from no meter feeding. So you're essentially saying that in Zone 1, we only want people to be here for 2 hours. If you need a longer parking stay, look at Zone 2, which is 3 hours, or look at Zone 3. So the idea is that we don't want you just moving your car within the same zone because it's taking away from that turnover in that zone within that time frame. So one of the things that we're asking for council is define what area of reparking do we want to designate? Do we want it for the entire zone, or do we want it in a block face? Yes, Jenny.
I would like to hear from the consultant about her experience with this regulation in other towns because it seems complicated. I don't know. It seems like I've never encountered it myself anywhere. And
and what problem is it addressing? Do we think a lot of people are? It seems like it would be complicated to enforce, and is there a real problem that we need to address of people?
Or maybe we should let people, if they're willing to move it.
Correct. So
why do we care?
It's addressing that issue of like employees parking in Zone 1, and that you don't ultimately get turnover of spaces because people are just hopscotching. Like employee 1 and employee 2 are just switching places with their cars within that same zone or that same block face. And yet you'd never then open up those spaces. So that's what they're trying to combat. The meter feeding just means at that one space, you can't keep feeding the meter, but what we're trying to do is open up for that turnover.
And this would just be in Zone 1?
This would be Zone 1 and 2, and again, do you want to say that, when we were talking about it today, there was a good idea that came up of what if you want to go downtown and have lunch, and then you want to go downtown and have dinner again? Well, if we say you can't park in Zone 1 more than once a day, then you can't do that. So then the idea came up of, well, maybe it's within the block face. So maybe you can't park on a block of Witherspoon for more than 2 hours, and then, maybe you need to go to the next block of Witherspoon if you need to come back for dinner, something like that. It seems more reasonable by the block face, but again, we defer to council to give us some guidance on that, and Julie Dixon will be here at the September 11th meeting, so if you do need more information, we can cover it then. This isn't a decision that has to be made tonight, but it's something to start thinking about.
I don't think it seems like a good idea. I'm just saying it out there. It seems like it's complicated and hard for people to understand, and I guess it would be easier to enforce with the new system, but I just don't. It seems like it might free up a few spaces, but I also don't know how pervasive it is and how many people would actually, because when the people have to go out and move their car, somebody else can zoom in and take their spot, so they do free up their car for a little, their spot for a little while. It's just not, I don't know.
I just had a question about the capability of the new system. So can we set it up without this extra layer of regulation, which seems confusing, and then just see, is there a problem with, say, 12 cars that are there all day in Zone 1 just hopscotching around? Or is it not really a problem? Can the technology track cars like that, and can we see those patterns, or are we just able to track, is a spot full, is it not full?
I think it's going to be a manual tracking. I don't know that it's necessarily something, unless somebody is paying by the app, with the app, will we be able to track who's in those spaces?
So how can it possibly be enforced?
Well, that's my question, is that I would love to hear from the police if they feel like this is something. I know they do it in neighborhoods with, when they chalk a tire. Is that?
But this wouldn't work for that.
No, I know, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Do
not
police
even the
think
chalk.
This is something I would want to know if the police think this is something they could enforce, then I would be more inclined towards it.
It ties into implementation of the LPR technology, the license plate recognition technology that we have. So as the meter people drive around with that technology, it is constantly scanning. So it's less related to the meters and more towards the enforcement hardware.
Well, so then they could do Liz's idea then,
So
couldn't we?
yes, they could do that, and it is something that we could implement later.
But that's not, just so we're clear, the LPRs we don't have that technology. It's not part of this plan. It would be something in the future we would have to budget for. So we don't have that, just so we're clear on that.
Well, so then we're not able to enforce it now either, then,
Right.
it sounds
Well,
like.
The only issue, what it's trying to resolve, is the issue of, a lot of times you'll see it with employees, and they just simply move their car a little bit to allow to the next space, and this just doesn't give that incentive. And if you do it on the block base, it just makes it a little more difficult.
I hear you.
That's
So your point is that there's probably not a perfect solution to enforcement, but it would give parking enforcement the authority when they see it to do something about it.
Right.
That seems reasonable to me. Jenny rightly asked, she'd like to hear from the consultant. You said this consultant recommended this? Maybe we don't need to hear from her if she's...
Yes, they recommended it. It's something that if you have if you regulate your parking by time limits, that this is just another, it's like the belts and suspenders.
Okay.
It then reinforces time limits within that zone that you were saying you can only park for that amount of time.
I mean, it seems to me that we should make decisions when we can, because there's so many issues here, and I would weigh in favor of not putting, yes, I would say yes, do this. To have
would
one
say-
less thing to, you gave me a funny look.
Well,
yeah.
I'm not sure, because I'm hearing two things, and then
Wait,
you said
yes,
that very
do it or not
confidently.
do it?
So yes, you want,
Well, we raised questions about, does the consultant think this is a good idea? Yes. Can it be enforced? Not
No.
perfectly, but
No, it can't.
But Mark has just said there may be opportunities in which it could, and talking about it sends a message. I mean, so. What's the downside? And instead, are we just going to put this on another list that we're going to revisit this the next month we're doing parking?
Because
I mean, I feel like all of these. I mean,
I think it makes it
are
too
we going to set a world
complicated.
record for parking meetings?
yes.
I mean, if we're going for that,
I think
then let's
we've
put it on
broken
the
that
list.
already.
Well, I agree with you. I'd like to, I wouldn't mind deciding this too, but I say don't do it.
Fine.
So-
Or then let's
I
decide
mean,
don't do it and then never talk about it again.
No, I
and
agree.
done.
I agree with you, Heather, completely.
Over and done.
And I just tell you, I think it's complicated for people parking. They're going to say, where's the zone? They're going to say, what? I've never seen this rule, which I never have seen. And there is no way. The only way to enforce it is with someone has a photographic memory. If the cops, if they can really remember. But I don't, maybe some of them can, but are they going to, it's going to have to be like a yellow car or something. Like it's going to have to be a special
Says
car.
the owner of the yellow car.
Exactly. My car would get caught. But I mean, I just
Okay,
don't.
I want to see if the other council people have strong feelings about this one way or another.
I don't have a strong feeling. I think if we do it, it should be by zone and not by street, because, if I go to Witherspoon Street to Small World, then, and later on in the evening, I want to go to whatever that restaurant is down by here, 3 Sevens or whatever it is, then I should be able to, if there is a parking space in front, and there are two different neighborhoods. So if we pursue, it's by zone, I think, not by street.
So my only concern is that if we had a policy or rule that we can't enforce consistently, and that we have just maybe use discretion of whether, if it's when you catch someone doing that, then you enforce it, then my concern would be that it could be considered that it's being enforced perhaps not in a fair manner.
So that's a good point. You should hear what she's saying. I mean, a car that's a really old car that's really recognizable, or a brand new
Or
car,
So fine. Okay, so they're not overdone. This is not coming up again?
No, but maybe it won't come up again to torture you.
We only have a few more opportunities, yeah.
So it sounds like it's a no.
I think
right
that
now.
this makes, from my perspective, this makes more sense if we have LPR. And short of LPR, I can just see the situation this is trying to address is you have the parking enforcement person there. The person hops in their car and drives to another spot. But if they can do that easily, then we're not having our normal parking problems. So maybe that's, I feel like I agree sort of with the sentiment. I don't think we're quite ready to enforce it, and I think there's enough discomfort with enforcing it that we're going to have enough things that we're doing that are going to make people mad.
Good point. Okay, next.
Just
Okay.
hold off on this one.
Thank you. Okay, this is just, this you saw at the last meeting. The only thing different on this slide is at the very bottom with the Wawa lot, I had question marks. I've just updated it to say keep as is. So we are going to keep the meters and the enforcement at the Wawa lot as is right now. And then again, you saw this at the last meeting. This is just where the 30-minute meters will be placed. So adding on to that loading zone topic, I think that the mayor brought up is we had talked about utilizing the loading zones as passenger loading areas in the future. But what we need to determine is what are the hours of loading in those spots, of commercial loading, not passenger loading, but commercial loading. The township and the borough had different time frames, and how do we want to standardize that? Do we want to standardize to 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday to Friday? Do we want to do that Monday to Saturday? Do you want to just have an 8 to 11 on Saturday? So just looking for feedback. We did touch on this with police, and Lieutenant Bukhari, he thought a 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday to Saturday would work well. So then the idea is after 5 p.m. it would be for passenger loading, any of those loading zones, as well as all day on Sunday.
Did you get a chance to speak to the merchants about this on Friday?
I think there was only one merchant at the meeting, and we didn't get any feedback on it.
I mean, are there happening on Friday, on Saturday afternoons? Are there loading?
There
they
is,
are?
yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I think it would be helpful just sorry to put this one off for Heather, but I mean, to just get a better sense, unless it's already been done, that conversation with the merchants of like what hours. I mean, I think ultimately it'd be nice to squeeze those hours, and I would almost say, can we push it earlier and start at 7 a.m. and try to get the trucks to come in, make the deliveries while it's not as crowded, and then get them out. And I think you just have better circulation, but I don't know if that's feasible or not.
But maybe we should have in the spirit of Heather's mandate to have a tentative decision barring pushback, because
They might agree, and then we would be done.
it seems like, I mean, it's like, since the police they know what goes on, so I tend to give credence to what he's saying and take his recommendation, and I like the idea of the 5 o'clock ending time and having the passenger loading the other times.
Okay. Is there general consensus on that unless we hear otherwise? Okay, excellent. Good point, Ms. Cromiller.
Okay, so Monday to Saturday, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Okay, thank you.
Wait, that's not what the slide said.
No, you said Saturday was not.
Well, but Lieutenant Bukhari, when we spoke, did say through Saturday, Monday to Saturday.
Because he liked uniformity, or because he thought there was a need on Saturday afternoon, or?
Because of a need.
If it is currently 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. I mean, if it's currently 8 a.m. to 11 a.m.
I wouldn't expand. Yeah.
Maybe we should leave that.
That's only one. That's only the loading zone.
Oh,
on
only on
South
Tulane.
Tulane.
Oh, I can't read.
Currently, it's only Monday to Friday.
Oh, okay.
And they're not metered spots, so we're not losing parking.
Correct.
All right. Is that all right with everybody then, the 7 to 5, Monday through Saturday, unless we hear otherwise?
And then at the other hours, there's a sign that says passenger drop off. Because I was thinking about it doesn't have to be ride share. It could be
Correct.
anyone dropping off passengers. I think that'd be helpful.
So it would be passenger loading, and the idea is to establish like 3-minute maximum or 5-minute maximum for that loading and unloading.
I think it should be 30 seconds.
But it works out well.
I hate it when people take so long.
I know
I'm for 5 minutes.
We've had a request, like by the Garden Theater, for some of our residents that want to be able to, that because there's no handicap accessible
If you're elderly or
parking.
Yeah.
disabled, that's.
Yeah.
That somebody can park or can drop off right at that loading zone and then find the parking.
But the thing is, having it be illegal right now makes everybody go fast, you know? Because everybody uses them right now, they just do it quick. We can keep that up somehow. But, I mean, can we put signs that say active loading only or something, you know, really push it so you can't just sit there? Yeah.
Yes, because we also talked about, something that says you have to stay with your vehicle.
Yeah.
Right? You can't stop
Yeah.
in and run it.
Yeah.
Do that type of action. So yes, we will definitely work on that language.
Okay.
So another topic, this does not need to be decided now, but we had briefly talked about it at the last meeting, was about temporary parking at the Franklin lot. So the lot you'll see in the bottom photo is divided in two areas. So the area on the right or on the western side, the municipality has been using for the parking of our municipal vehicles. That had been part of a lease agreement with the university before we acquired the land, and it still continues now. The area to the east, which is the larger area of the lot, now is really unregulated. We've seen it over the past 6 months of different people just coming in to park. So there's a question out there of people are using this to park. Do you want to monetize that for some return? And I mean, you could even set it up where whatever money is earned through that parking is dedicated to something. It's an established fund. So just putting it out there. We've had different requests over times. I know the public school has been looking at it, especially in light of the referendum and the work at the high school. In the past, the Arts Council has asked to park people there when there's special events. We've had the same with Rec Department, and it's come up off and on with the Princeton Housing Authority and like the Clay Street parking. So just putting it out there. I know at the last meeting we talked about dog park. I don't know if there's been any further thought or discussion on this, or if we want to continue.
So just before any of my colleagues speak, I just want to make it totally clear we're just talking about temporary parking because this is slated for affordable housing. So we're probably talking a year's worth of, we'd have it open for a year, maybe upwards of 2 years, but probably closer to a year, because as soon as construction starts, we can't have people parking there. So I just want to make that clear. This is not a permanent solution. Yeah, Ms. Howard?
But I'm confused. So it's interesting. I've driven by, and there seem to be a bunch of cars in that you called the western part. Is that also where people who live in those Franklin Apartments park? Because we're not talking about affecting their parking, are we?
Well, again, that is designated for municipal parking only. We've had people creep in there that have not been given any permissions to park there. And I think police are actually going to start enforcing that.
Is there a gate on that side?
It's not an active gate, but we have talked about chaining it or putting some sort of a device in there.
First of all, I think providing a new parking lot will fill with cars that are currently parking elsewhere. Those new empty spots that are created by those cars will be filled up with other cars. And even if people know it's temporary, in 2 years, whenever we get rid of it, it's going to cause a new parking crunch. And I think it's a bad idea for that reason. I also think we talk about being a walkable, bikeable town. We talk about reducing traffic, reducing emissions, making a climate action plan, et cetera. And this plan for adding a new parking spot, even if it's temporary, goes against all of those goals. I just think there's there might be short-term gain of some people getting parking, but I think there's no long-term good that will come of it. And I also think that that's just what the obvious idea because everyone wants to park, but we could be creative. So here's a list of ideas. A winter ice skating rink, wouldn't that be great? It doesn't seem so hard. If we have the money to make it in, put all those meters in, I think we have money to put like a plastic thing and fill it up with water. A bike training area, kite flying, hay bale gardens, jumping rope, hopscotch, pop-up outdoor yoga studio, tiny house demonstration area, games, letting kids play there where they used to play in the street. I don't know what kids used to play in the street, but they could do it there, whatever they did, stickball or whatever they used to do. Roller skating and skateboarding, neighborhood garage scale, a big chalk mural, an actual painted mural. But last but not least, temporary parking for special events or special needs, especially by the municipality or the school and by the Arts Council or other people that need temporary parking because there's no long-term effects of that. And then the last thing is, I think it might end up causing a problem when it's time to build affordable housing, because those people are going to be parking there and they're not going to want to give up those spots no matter. So I think it could be a stumbling block. I don't really think it will, but I think it could.
Can I add one to your list? Farmers market.
Okay.
I think that would be a
Ms.
good
Howard,
spot
did you
for
want to
that.
say?
So, Jenny, not to be, I mean, it seems to me, though, that if we're not going to, every time I drive by, there are cars there, right? And we have the gates, what you called it an inactive gate. The gate is up. So it seems to me the choice is either we need to put the gate down and we shouldn't let anybody park there. Maybe that's what you're saying, Jenny. Or if we're going to have the current situation, the status quo should not continue because people shouldn't be parking there and not paying.
Agree.
So, okay, so I was understanding it's the situation to be, are we going to charge the people or are we going to just let it happen? So if that were the argument, if those were the options, I would say we absolutely should charge because I assume too, once school starts, there'll be all kinds of high school students parking there, right? And so that is not a good solution because then we're not monetizing and we're all of the ills that Jenny described. So I'm sort of agnostic about either, but it seems, can we just put down the thing and not let people park?
We can put a barrier if the gates aren't working, yes.
Do you know the history of this lot? Because that's an awful lot of parking. It was at the
from
hospital in
yes.
addition to the garage. Got it. All right. Okay. Got it. All right. Does anybody else want to?
Yeah,
Mr. Quinn?
I, much as I respect Jenny, and I'd also add that we could dump a bunch of sand in there and make it a beach in the summer. The notion of having parking spaces that are empty when there's a perception that doesn't match the reality that there's no place to park in town. So when we're talking about monetizing these spaces, we could do a straight permit, right, without putting in any hardware, any pay stations. If we approach the merchants, and I'm just thinking, I'm thinking back to the major objections to when we did that little demonstration bike lane, the beta bike lane. There was concern that the 17 spaces that were 20-hour spaces represented a hardship because they were low-wage workers working on Nassau Street. And I think that we're going to have to, I'm not saying that this is a permanent solution. Obviously, the permanent solution for this site is affordable housing. We are going to have to come up with solutions for the employee parking situation in a way that is not going to be terribly convenient for the employees, but which is also going to recognize the fact that we have downtown merchants who maybe can't afford to pay people to park in town. So I would support a no hardware, a permit that was available to employees through coordination with PMA or other merchant. I know not every merchant's a member of PMA. That would be we would set the dates like we did on the sign there that said it starts on this date and it ends on this date, and if you park after this date, and it buys us a little time to think about what are the potential other sort of remote and shuttle in options. So right now, I noted that one of the people quoted in Town Topics about the Beta Bike Lane parks there, he works at Labyrinth. Well, my understanding, and Kristen can correct me if I'm wrong, that Labyrinth employees get a permit to park in lot 21, and then they can take Tiger Transit to Nassau Street. Now, that's not terribly convenient, but it is, again, it's an option that allows us to address, and I'm not suggesting that we take over lot 21. I know that the university has its own plans. I think I don't want to see it either we do a beach or a skating rink, and the rink would be expensive. I mean, it's not cold enough days in the year to have skating on the lake. So there's something about the idea that there's parking there that's just sitting there that strikes me as, although I fully understand this, give it to them and then take it away, but as long as it's clearly outlined and we're working with the downtown merchants.
So as much as I would like to see a dog park there, my dog would love to see a dog park there, and even a farmer's market. The cost, I imagine I don't know what the cost involved would be to make that happen. So, but I do agree that it needs to be monitored, and it needs to be put to use. Is it for a year that we're talking about to be put to use? And as far as, I don't like the idea of monetizing either if it's for students that are going to be using it. But is there any way that we could do half and half? Half to use for permit for the schools, and then half to perhaps to use by employers or the merchants that may want to be providing that for their employees?
Yeah, my understanding is that we can't limit it to employees, that if we have a permit program, that it needs to be open to whoever wants to get a permit. Is that not true?
I think as long as we ordinance whatever it is, I mean, we currently have employee permits in lots that we sell, so it would just be an extension of that regulation.
But only employees can buy them? What? It's sort of neither here nor there anyway. At this point, I don't think it's...
I don't know why employees would buy a permit when there's free parking on Wiggins that's not full. So why would anyone buy a permit for that lot
Well,
right
people
now?
have bought a lot of permits at the McLean lot. I mean, people do buy them.
But are they employees?
Yeah, their employers buy them for employees. All right. I said that we would open this up for public comment. So if no one has a burning comment on the dais, I'd like to open it up for anybody who'd like to speak.
Sure. My name is Monica Adams. I live at 4 Harris Road, right there. So I probably know this lot, the traffic, the usage, the flow. I'm willing to say better than anyone in this room. And one thing I have not heard that really bothers me about Franklin, this is the primary walking route to the school, to and from the school every day. The traffic on that road is heavy. We, in fact, if you go by there, have the only driveway facing that road, we back in so that we can pull out facing forward for safety reasons. My neighbors and us. And I think you guys are not thinking about who's using this, what is the extent of usage by kids, in fact, how do people drive, treating this as a thoroughfare, and what is your, what's the vision for the town, and what do you want to have? And I'm hearing monetize, support the business. Really important, okay? But guys, this is where kids walk all day long. I have small kids. My neighbors have kids. I think increasing that traffic flow, there's no speed bumps. It is a thoroughfare. There's a huge amount of traffic in and out of Avalon. I'd ask you to stop and think. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Is there anybody else?
Alvin McGowan, 12 Ray Street. I'm speaking more as my hat as the housing authority. And the only real concern that I think we have, and I think Ed Trisselli will have, is that this is temporary. That this will end. This is not something that, okay, fine, when you have affordable housing, it's going to be affordable housing, and you're also still going to have a lot there. Maybe it'll work out that way, but I just want to make sure that that's what the plan is now. And so when you hear some plan about affordable housing, you're to consider that and not consider that along with the fact that you're still going to have a lot of some type there.
Alvin, I want to make sure I understand. So your fear, I think, which I think I would share, but I want to make sure I understand, is that you don't want it to become, then people become reliant on it, and then it becomes a reason to not put affordable housing there.
Or that once affordable housing is there, you have to still consider the fact that it's already being used for something else. Mm-hmm. Just have to hear whatever the affordable housing is, hear that, and then and make that decision. So again, this is temporary.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak?
Yaina Moore. I'd like to speak to the other parking issue that you were discussing with regard to trying to prevent a single car from parking more than once for a length of time in any particular zone. That seems to me to be fraught with some issues that go well beyond whether that person is paying or whether there is an available parking spot. It seems to me that it gets into some civil liberties issues and privacy that once and if LPR is available, it begins to track people. And I think you would get resistance that comes from a different perspective than just whether the cost of and the location and the availability of parking. And it doesn't necessarily speak to what I believe your general interest is to have available parking, perhaps for more and different people. And I don't think that methodology is best advised. It is often used as opposition to some of these traffic light cameras and license plate reading and a whole host of things that people are having their privacies infringe upon. On the matter of the Franklin lot, I agree with Alvin McGowan, chair of the Affordable Housing Board, as well as member of the Housing Authority Board, with regard to setting a purpose and working towards it in terms of providing affordable housing and doing that judiciously and promptly without considering interim uses that therefore further impact the neighborhood in ways that they have defined would be negative. A temporary use that perhaps brings social gathering and unity of the neighborhoods, I think is a very good idea. While we may have a farmer's market, I thought that Council Chair Krummeller's idea of a flea market has been very successful in many towns all over the country. And they too can be monetized if it's about money, but certainly there could be greater purpose in terms of just having, a community activity, but not to put into effect parking as the privilege and the purpose of of what remains as the lot, because as Ms. Krummeller said, there are so many other reasons why not to provide more parking and to better manage the parking that we already have, including the fact that there's residual parking in the parking garage that Avalon Bay owns, that certainly they, if they choose to, could monetize it. And better integrating the freebie to other sort of remote parking spaces or lots, not this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak as part of the work session?
Cherry 24 Dempsey. I agree with, I'm concerned about getting people with an expectation of something on that lot and then taking it away from them. So if we don't have another location for whatever wonderful idea we come up with, then we're going to have a lot of disappointed people. That's number one. Number two, whatever happens there is going to generate a lot of cars, I would think, if it's successful. You know, if it's a flea market, people are going to be driving to the flea market. So it just creates another mess. So I don't think that's a good idea. On the parking limitations downtown, I'll just mention from my own personal situation. I get together with friends every Friday. We normally get together at 5 o'clock, but some of us are late, and we finish around 7:30. That's more than the time is allowed for a parking meter. And, you know, we go to an establishment, there are 3 different establishments around Palmer Square that we go to, and so it would really cramp our style. And, you know, we are buying throughout the whole period that we're there. We're having another another round of something or other. So we might just decide to go somewhere else because it's too much trouble. So I think you have to be really careful about this. And I also think you have to be careful about tourists coming into the community and not knowing what system you have going and having them trip over it somehow because they're staying at the Nassau Inn or someplace and they move their car and all of a sudden they're, violating the rules. You wanted a friendly town. One other thing, when there are major events at the chapel, there is a major parking problem, and I'd like to see some innovation on this, and I've discussed it with the university, with Kim. The chapel, is a big place, and at Christmas time in particular, there are very large concerts there, and it's very hard to park. And I would like to recommend that the southern part of Nassau Street be put aside for parking for people going to the chapel. And I know, just for that one night, so that people who can't walk 5 miles can, get to the chapel. I just feel, and the university says they understand there's a big problem and they don't have an answer. So let's think of some innovation, some way to make Christmas more fun and other big events that are at the chapel so that people have parking. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, is there anybody else who'd like to speak? Ms. Howard?
So I complained earlier we had too many parking meetings, but in contravention of that, I think it's probably important to remind ourselves what our principles are. We feel like we talked about this a zillion times, but maybe people who've been tonight to meeting first. The goal downtown is to be friendly. I think Kip's right. It's absolutely to be friendly, and we want to have a vibrant downtown. And the goal throughout the whole process of the downtown parking has been to ensure turnover so that we can have, so that there's sufficient business for the merchants. And Yaina, former Mayor Moore, also, I think, touched on this. It is to ensure sufficient turnover so that we can have a vibrant downtown, which I know is a goal we all share. So just because we jumped to specifics today doesn't mean we didn't have goals, and maybe it's worth reminding ourselves that this process is guided by goals, and that's important. And I think Yana raised a good issue about the civil liberties issues with those, the license plate recognition stuff. I'm glad I won't be here when you discuss that issue next year.
Thanks. Yeah, Ms. Kremiller?
Do we know what is going on with the Avalon Bay Garage? Is it full? Is it open to the public?
I don't know for sure. Last time I drove by, they do have hourly rates on the garage, so it is, as far as I know, open to the public.
Maybe that should weigh into our decision on the Franklin Road lot. If there is parking available, it's another reason not to do it. Yeah, I think it is. It's probably hourly. It's probably as long as people want. Usually parking garages are. But I just, want to reiterate, I think you're setting yourself up for a really hard time in 2 years when we give it up. It's blithely saying, oh, let's just do it temporarily, but it's going to be hard. I'm just telling you, it's going to be really hard. If people really do, if there are employees who will park there, which I don't really think there are, but if there are employees who park there, they're not going to have a place to park in 2 years, and you're going to have to be and they're going to come up to you and say, I don't have any place to park, and they're going to be pleading.
I mean, the flip side is I also don't want people to think that it's always going to be a ice rink or something, right? I mean, we have to remind, for the record, Alvin's not here anymore, but Ed is. There's going to, there's going to be something there. Right?
Agree.
So I think the flip side of that also holds true, that we are committed to building on that lot. It's an important part of our plan.
Agree.
And so that's worth repeating for everyone.
Agree. But we have had lots of temporary fun projects. Like, remember that one that they put on that ugly area behind the Hall Fish? So
I just want to pick up on something that Ms. Howard said about goals and principles. And I think one of the fundamental goals of this new parking system is that you can think about sort of concentric rings coming out of the center of town, where in the very center you want people parking for a shorter period of time and for there to be movement in and out. Then as you get further out, people can park for a little bit longer, and the real goal is to get people who are parking all day to park further, either park in the garage or to park further out. And one of the ways to think about the Franklin lot, if we were to do parking there, is to use it to create this sort of incentive and like a shift in behavior, and to use it almost to demonstrate, hey, you can park someplace that feels sort of far away and have a 10-minute walk, and you can have guaranteed parking. So you're coming in, it actually probably is more environmental that people come in, they know where they're going, they just park there, it's a done deal, and then they're walking into town, and you're taking away some of that behavior where you have somebody park in a spot, then move it every 2 hours to escape the meter person, although maybe we can't prevent that entirely. So if you think about it, though, as like you're creating a new system and you're creating this, a new mentality for how to get to work, and then that particular parking spot could be moved further out. And I think that the consultant has identified some areas that might be like that it would be, yes, you can't have this particular parking spot in the Franklin lot in a year and a half, but you can park in one of these other areas, and we're going to have a permit system there. So I think it's just a different way to think about the the system. But I think there's 100% agreement that we have to be super clear in our messaging that this is temporary, and don't sign up for it if you're going to be sad in a year and a half, so sad in a year and a half to give it up.
We've just said 3 different dates. We went from a year, and then Jenny said 2 years, and then the mayor split the difference. So we need to be clear in the messaging.
All right, so I'm going to try to summarize what I'm hearing, which is a lot of things. But my general, I think what I'm hearing in general is that people are interested, there's a majority of people who are interested in continuing to look at the lot. Is that right?
Well, I'm with Heather, just make the decision. I can see the writing on the wall that I'm outvoted, but if I can get the last word, I do think people know already there's parking open on Wiggins right now. It's not, I think we have empirical evidence right now that Wiggins is not being fully utilized by employees when they could be using it, and they know about it. Yeah, the free spots all along Wiggins. I'm not sure, you know, I don't want to, I'm in favor of bike lanes on Wiggins, but right now, employees don't even want to walk all that way. So the reason that they're still going to be moving their cars around because they don't even want to walk to Wiggins right now.
One more question. Deanna, what's it going to take operationally to charge there?
So we would not be installing any hardware. It would be, if we did anything in the lot, we would look to use the mobile app for some sort of just like a daytime permit system.
Well, one thing I would maybe encourage Princeton Community Housing working with the town is to maybe have some sort of banner that we can put up that announces the housing to come or something, so it's clear. Even though I don't think we're ready to have a drawing yet, but maybe at some point that banner could be updated. But I think that would be an important part of the messaging. Okay. Hopefully, does that give you enough direction?
I think so. I think we're looking at the special use allowances and possibly working on some employee parking.
Well, I do, you know, I hate to bring in another subject, but we have never really discussed kind of the public policy implications of focusing on employee parking. It is, I mean, employers everywhere else provide their own parking, and we've never had the discussion about, do we as a council, is it our obligation to address that issue, and why now when we never have before? So I think we need to have that discussion before we decide that this is an employee lot, because some employers pay, just like they pay their employees well, and they provide parking for them. Some employers do that. Some employers don't pay their employees well, and they don't provide parking. Some probably pay them well and don't provide parking. But it's an employer expense that's part of doing business. So I also don't really think we should be in the business of, we shouldn't take on the burden of employee parking as a policy, as a municipality, which we have never done before, and now we're deciding to do. So if we are, so maybe, you know, I think you all should discuss it amongst yourselves.
Well, I don't think this is providing it. I think this is providing an opportunity to charge for it. And I think that right now, if employees are coming in a car, they're parking somewhere. So sticking our head in the sand doesn't mean they're not going to use a meter or use a spot in a garage. So in some ways, I think it's better to have a plan and.
But why are we not letting other people park there?
Well, that's what I raised. Like, I don't know if we can limit it. I mean, I think we can limit the time. And I thought it came from an attorney. I might be misunderstanding, but I thought that we had to just offer it and not be checking who's taking the permit or not. And it might be easier to administer that way anyway. I mean, if people are buying this from an app, how are we supposed to make that determination of who their employer is?
That
Or-
can be one of the business rules that you set up for the permittee to supply, that they have to supply proof of employment with, somebody that's based in town.
I mean, my guess is if are we going to make it competitive with the downtown parking? I mean, because some employers what is it fair for us to be subsidizing parking and when some employers pay for expensive parking?
Well, back to the question, and Trishka, you may need to jump in. I think what the mayor is remembering is if we designate, we can't make an agreement with one business that they have the use of parking on our public lands, but we can establish a permit program that any business in town could then apply to.
I feel like it's getting a little bit late, so I'd like to wrap this conversation up so we can move on to the rest of the agenda.
So I think we're almost there. So again, to the point of employee parking, we don't have to decide this. We do currently sell employee permits in lots. We do not sell them on street. And so one of the thoughts is if we do something that does speak to the employee need for parking, then we can take them out of those 2-hour zones and those 3-hour zones and direct them to those longer term zones or the garage where we want them. So it's something, it doesn't need to be decided now. I mean, it's not needed before we implement the new system. You can look at it as a pilot program in the future. You can look at designating just certain streets where this could apply. So just putting that out there, and so then the next.
Deanna, one quick question. That $30 a month, is that consistent with what residents pay in McLean?
Resident permits are, yes, it's $30 a.
Okay. I wouldn't want to have residents pay more. I mean, I think because I'm with Jenny on the special treatment. Yeah.
Right. So again, we don't have to decide this at all. It's just putting the information out there. So we'll be back again in September for both meetings in September. I think currently what we're looking at doing is municipal code work session on the 11th, touching on rates, and then look to focus more on rates at the second meeting in September. The whole idea is then we will be back in October with ordinances to be introduced for metered parking, so that those are all, they all go through the public hearing process and adoption by the end of October. So that's the time frame we're looking at right now. And I'll update this presentation with the notes that I've taken from tonight. We'll get it up onto the website, so it should be available on the website probably tomorrow afternoon or Wednesday.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, one final comment. I feel like some people reacted to our use of the term monetize, and we should just explain that I think what's motivating us on that question is just that as we deal with property tax burdens, the property tax burden
Thank you. All right. Anybody else? Okay. Thanks, Deanna. All right, now we're going to move on to our ordinance public hearing for this evening, which is for ordinance 2018-17, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton establishing fees and procedures for performing marriage and civil union ceremonies and amending Chapter 2 of the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974.
I'll move it.
Second.
Okay, I'd like to open up the public hearing for this ordinance. Would anybody like to speak? No? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing, and it's been moved by Ms. Krummeler, seconded by Ms. Howard. Please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Ms. Krummeller?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
And the ordinance is approved unanimously. And next is 2018-18, an ordinance of the Mayor and Council of Princeton concerning salaries and compensation of certain personnel of the municipality of Princeton. I'd like to open up the public hearing for this ordinance. Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Krummeler, seconded by Ms. Howard. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Ms. Krummeller? Yes. Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
And the ordinance passes unanimously. And I think we'll just go through because it's not that much longer. Okay. So next is the ordinance introduction, 2018-19, an ordinance by Princeton authorizing the conveyance of Block 7002, Lot 1, Block 7003, Lot 1, Princeton Tax Map, and a portion of the Terhune Road right-of-way situated between Mount Lucas Road and State Highway Route 206 to the Princeton First Aid and Rescue Squad pursuant to NJSA 40A12-1.
I'll move it.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Ms. Krummeler and seconded by Ms. Howard. Are there any questions or comments on this ordinance? Mark, did you want to say something? You don't have to. Okay, probably smart. All right, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Ms. Krummeller?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
This ordinance has been introduced, and the public hearing will be on September 11th, 2018.
You know, I'd like to bring up an old borough practice of doing resolutions in block. I mean, in the next 5, if anyone has any questions on them, I don't want to do it, but I don't have any on any
Is that
of
a
them.
motion? I'll second
Yes,
it.
okay.
Second.
All right, so the resolutions have been moved in block by Ms. Krummeler, seconded by Ms. Howard. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and for the consent agenda, I would actually like to remove item 11 because I'm going to make a addition to that.
I move adoption of all items on the consent agenda except for item 11.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, and then back to item 11, which is the appointments to boards, commissions, and committees. Leticia and I spoke with a really great student today, Denzel Washington. He's going to be a senior at Princeton High School next year.
What a great name.
And he has. Yeah, he wears it well. It is like it's a lot to live up to, but he does it well. So I'd like to add his name as an appointment to the Youth Advisory Committee for this school year.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Krummeler, seconded by Mr. Quinn. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. And is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.